morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, it seems that not a day goes by where we don't hear a new rumor about Batman vs. Superman, or whatever they're calling it, for 2015, which is understandable because not only is the movie hotly anticipated, but it's about to go into production, like this month or next. So you would think we'd be hearing some announcements, at least casting announcements, but Warner Brothers, to their credit, is doing an excellent job of keeping a lid on leaks. So when they do make an official announcement, it really captures everyone's attention. I'd also say another reason that Warner Brothers is able to capture everyone's attention whenever they make a DC announcement, and why there might be so many rumors, is that Warner Brothers is not only making bold choices, but out-of-the-box choices. So it really means that anything could happen. Anything. And I think that's how they're generating a lot of their headlines, which is a tactic I think they are borrowing from DC Comics. Part of the New 52 generates a lot of headlines with changes they make. Sometimes they seem unnecessary, but it still gets the headline. Although it's really a short-term game because Marvel just regained the majority of comic book sales as well, and they already have box office domination. So interesting to see which strategy works better. But right now we're in the dominating the headlines phase for DC, at least, and as long as it's working, I don't see them changing it anytime soon. But because anything could happen, I think people just go crazy trying to think of what potentially could happen, and that's why any rumor could be legitimate. So when a rumor comes out, and I hope all people who are reporting on comic book movie news, and movie news do this, one really has to think, is this a legitimate rumor? Might this actually have gotten around the Warner Brothers publicity wall of steel? Or is it just a small website, and it's often the case that's where these originate, trying to make a name for itself and get some hits, drive some traffic? Because a lot of times I feel smaller websites might be like, well, if we just guess it and it turns true, instant legitimacy. But there's one rumor that's been circulating that I've been slow to report on because it just seems so crazy and such a dumb idea. But a number of you have been asking me about it, and it seems to come from a somewhat credible source, or at least been credible in the past. See how this works for these smaller sites? Also, when you think about it, you can begin to see the building blocks in Man of Steel for this idea. So let's discuss. Now, it's a rumor about Wonder Woman, and for those of you who haven't heard, the rumor is that Wonder Woman will be Kryptonian, and then the Amazons will be a Kryptonian settlement. And you might recall in the first film, Man of Steel, they said that Krypton sent out exploring parties to settle other planets and other solar systems. So it's conceivable that the Amazons could come from there. Secondly, you might remember that the Kryptonians don't have their children the regular or the Earth way, but they kind of grow them in an underwater garden. So it's conceivable that they could just be like, you know what, let's just crank out women, because something maybe happens. So that is a way you could explain having a race of all women and the fact they could repopulate. That's something often that the comic book has struggled with. And recently, I believe Brian Wood made a very controversial decision as to how that happens in the comics. But I like his idea much better. Basically, he said that every year or so, the Amazons would go and raid pirate ships and have sex with all the pirates and then kill them. And then if they had male babies, they would send them down to, oh, my Greek mythology is not great, Hephaestus, the forge who's married to Persephone down at the bottom, and they all work for him. So that's where Wonder Woman's brothers are. And I thought that was a somewhat interesting idea and really plays into Greek mythology quite well. But this Kryptonian idea, I think, plays into what David Goyer and Zack Snyder are doing over here, or David Goyer, I guess, is the main architect of the DC Cinematic Universe now, and that's trying to create a very realistic environment. I think that Marvel has all the fantasy. They've got these Norse gods. They've got a space thing coming up with Guardians of the Galaxy, and we've even discussed whether or not Marvel can pull it off of making that feel like a cohesive, coherent universe, cinematic universe, or maybe just too much of a hodgepodge. But I think that DC might be like, well, everyone likes the realism that Christopher Nolan brought into The Dark Knight, so we're going to go for realistic, continue with that with going forward with this new DC cinematic universe for which Man of Steel was the starting point. And therefore, it seems if you're going to make Wonder Woman Kryptonian, and also, by the way, this plays into the Supergirl rumor, that Supergirl will be Man of Steel too, because wouldn't that make Wonder Woman Supergirl? Or maybe, I know there was a comic book some of you mentioned that had the actual Supergirl already on Earth, and that's her pod that was open when Kal-El finds that ship at in Man of Steel, the first Man of Steel. But maybe she would also be an Amazon. You don't know. That could play into it, and that would make Wonder Woman Superwoman. So basically, I could see David Goyer going, well, this is supposed to be realistic, and instead of having all these different sources for powers, that'll make us too much like Marvel. It might be hard for some people, mainstream audiences, to believe. So what if all superpowers come from aliens? You can keep Martian the Manhunter. Then you could have, I guess, what does this mean then? Is Aquaman from Krypton? Is the Flash have Kryptonian DNA or something? Are the rings, instead of coming from Oa, are they also from Krypton? Is it Kryptonian technology? I guess, those little sticks that they put into everything. I guess you could see that, if you stick a ring on it, it could conceivably become the ring, the emblem that had that kind of look to it. So I think I can see where David Goyer might be like sitting in a room surrounded by sycophants or yes men, which I can only guess because nobody's telling him that some of these ideas aren't great, or at least he's executing them poorly. But you can see the liberties he already took with Superman. I can see him sitting there going like, this is genius. People are going to marvel at my brilliance of how I've tied everything together. But I think what he's overlooking is that he's robbing these iconic other characters of their own franchises and legacies. He's just making everything spin off really basically of Superman. And while I can understand that from a movie executive's perspective that all this Greek mythology might be a tough sell, and how are you going to tie that into our realistic Batman-Superman world that we've created, you just have to find a way. And I think the New 52 has done a pretty good job with the way they've handled Wonder Woman and her Greek mythology by really updating it, making it seem more modern. But I think that you have to remember that the DC Trinity is because they're three equals. Wonder Woman is the most famous female comic book character of all time. And to rob her of her backstory and to just make her an offshoot, a secondary character to Superman's franchise, I think would have a lot of people very angry. Now, I have to say, I feel for mainstream audiences to really love Wonder Woman, changes do need to be made. I think she's a tough sell. She's always been a tough sell. But I think just completely, but I think tacking her on to a male character's mythology is a huge mistake and highly insulting. I think if you want to create maybe a new mythology for her, tweak it, that's great. I could be on board with that. I got on board the tweaks they made to Superman. I feel that there's potential there still. But to do this to Wonder Woman, I think would be, I think that this might be going too far, pushing the edge of the envelope for Warner Brothers. But I'm curious, comic book fans, how do you feel? And mainstream moviegoers, how do you feel? This might be where there's the disconnect. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story of the day is that it was announced that Zoe Saldana is going to star in a remake of Rosemary's Baby. But it won't be a movie, it's going to be a miniseries on NBC. Now you might be thinking, Grace, this sounds like a TV news story. What is doing on morning movie news? And the reason I bring it up is because Zoe Saldana, of course, is starring in another very big project, a big movie project, and that's Guardians of the Galaxy as Gamora. So I think that if I were Marvel Studios, I've often said this, I think that the disconnect between TV and movies is pretty big, and audiences do sense a difference. I'd be kind of upset that she was downgrading herself to TV actress status. Although Halle Berry is also, as you might recall, working on a TV miniseries as well, where she plays a female astronaut. But, I think in both cases, these actresses are just, desperate to get some traction. I think they both, despite being Gamora, I think Zoe Saldana, really her career is not working out, I think, as well as she would have liked. She was really relegated to the back of Star Trek Into Darkness. She had like one scene that seemed so pointless that it really only seemed to be there to give her something to do. Of course, with the Klingons, as you might remember. And also, Kerry Washington is finding huge success on television with Scandal. Female actresses have, in at least recent history, done quite well on television, while it's hard to find really good roles in movies. Although that changed this year, obviously, with Gravity, Hunger Games, and the like. But anyway, I think that this isn't a cable miniseries. If this was Rosemary's Baby on AMC, on HBO, on Showtime, even maybe Starz, I would see some legitimacy to it. But I think going on an NBC miniseries is extremely risky. And I think when you already have Chris Pratt on Parks and Recreation, then you really have no real movie actors in the film anymore. You have, unless they're doing character voices, you have Bradley Cooper and Vin Diesel doing Rocket Raccoon and Groot, but then your live action actors are Chris Pratt from Parks and Recreation, Zoe Saldana now from Rosemary's Baby on NBC, and then Dave Bautista, a wrestler. And even your secondary characters are Lee Pace from Pushing Daisies. I mean, he had a bit part in the Hobbit films as the Elf King, but still, I mean, I think he's more famous for his television work. And then also, you have Karen Gillan, who's from Doctor Who, another TV property. So, and also James Gunn, as we all saw from that, I mean, Benicio del Toro and Glenn Close are there, of course, but they have secondary, very small supporting, semi-supporting roles, like small roles. And as we all saw from the after-credit scene in Thor, you have James Gunn doing somewhat of a campy, almost Saturday morning live-action TV approach to this. So I think Guardians of the Galaxy needs to hit the thrusters and like break free of this pull of TV, because right now it's in their what is it called? Oh, help me out here. Tractor beam. It's in television's tractor beam, and it needs to get out of it. All right, so that's the second story of the day. Right down below, I know a lot of you feel very strongly about the strengths of television, and maybe, you know what, maybe Rosemary's Baby will be as good as The Blacklist. It better be. All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story of the day, it was very disappointing. The National Board of Review gave out its awards the other day, and it has celebrities, famous actors and people in the industry presenting the awards to others. And they're set in advance. And they have more. It's not like just like the typical big awards shows, like the Oscars, the Golden Globes, where they have some quick banter. They're given a significant amount of time to, kind of do a monologue. And Meryl Streep presented an award for once to Emma Thompson for Saving Mr. Banks. Very worthy of the award. Emma Thompson's fantastic. And Meryl Streep apparently agrees and wrote a very nice poem about an ode to Emma, or what Emma is owed was the title. Very cute, very clever, Streep. Apparently you can do more than just act, but you're also a brilliant, pun person. But anyway, the speech made headlines that Meryl Streep made because it took a nasty turn. And basically she really decided to attack Walt Disney. And she basically talked about how he was racist, and very misogynist, very against women. And for ammo, she brought out a letter that had been written from the company, not Walt Disney personally, to an aspiring female animator in 1938, saying that, I'm sorry, but women do not participate in any of the creative aspects of making animated movies here. They only do the assisting, and it's all young men. And so she read this, and she basically just ripped into Walt Disney. Now, there's a time and place for everything, except for this, I feel. I feel that, why take a nice moment? And I feel with a movie that was very fair and that showed some of the negative qualities of Walt, and just uses an opportunity to, punch somebody who, by the way, is dead and can't defend himself. And his children are dead. His whole family's dead. His immediate family. Diane Disney Miller just recently passed away. There's no one to say anything in this man's defense. And while, yes, he, could he have done more? Did he make some mistakes? Yes. But I think you could pick any Hollywood executive from those times, and you could find something horrible that they said. And also that letter, I don't think you could damn Disney for that, because he didn't write the letter. It came from his company. And I think you find very few women doing anything of major importance in Hollywood in the 1930s. I'm sorry Meryl Streep didn't go and find a letter from, screenwriters or directors. This is, it's been a long time coming, and you're starting to finally see some gains, but nobody's going to be happy to have women working in film if they're going to be all bitter about it and have a chip on their shoulder and start attacking people for things that were done decades ago. It's important. I know you guys, some people say, oh, Grace, you talk a lot about women's rights and everything, because it's important. But I think another important aspect of women's rights succeeding is being a team player. I don't want movies that just star women, but that's a tangent. That's going off on the side. As for Meryl Streep, I think that Walt Disney did a lot of good. He created a lot of wonderful female characters, by the way. Pollyanna, a lot of his animated heroines. He did some really nice work his whole life, and he has a huge female fan base. And he's created wonderful ways for families to be together. Disney did a lot of good. I think that while the negative is there, and Saving Mr. Banks, as I said, does a good job of acknowledging that and painting a portrait of a real person and not a saint, which I think sometimes the Disney company in the past has done, I don't think Meryl Streep needs to go in the opposite direction and draw a mustache on him and black out one of his teeth and give him devil horns. I just think it's really disrespectful, considering that Walt Disney, all he gave to society, he really helped shape society, by the way, in the 1950s and 60s with The Wonderful World of Color, creating this persona and this aspirational thing for for people that still exists today. And as I said, the thing about families and wonderful entertainment, creating the animation empire and the genre, the medium, which gives so much business today, as we can see. So I thought that was a really poor form of Meryl Streep, and it was sad to see. And it's the kind of behavior that when someone like myself does try and say something, you know, promote women's rights, it creates that knee-jerk negative reaction when someone does something really horrible like this. So that took a point off Meryl Streep's, personal score for me. But I'm curious how you guys feel about it. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. The viewer question comes from Matt St. Clair. He says, "Hello, Grace. One question I have for you is, since you just discussed Josh Hutcherson, yesterday I answered a viewer question about whether or not Josh Hutcherson has a future beyond Hunger Games, especially because he's a shorter actor. And while there are other short actors, Josh Hutcherson unfortunately has been, come across as short on the red carpet for the Hunger Games and also within the films. But anyway, Matt St. Clair says, so you talked about Josh Hutcherson and whether he can be a leading man. Do you think his co-star Jennifer Lawrence will retain her star status when she is through with the Hunger Games and X-Men, since those 2 franchises are very successful and the biggest box office wins on her resume? Excellent question, Matt St. Clair. I think that, of course, the jury is still out on Jennifer Lawrence. She is the really hot star at the moment. But remember Kristen Stewart? What happened to her? She's nowhere to be found. These franchises do a great job of keeping their actors in the spotlight, but when the franchise goes away and you no longer have that PR machine pushing you out there, sometimes actors do disappear for a while until they find another PR machine to promote them. Or they can try and, or you might be someone like Angelina Jolie who self-generates publicity. No matter what you might think of Angelina Jolie personally or her work, everybody has to admit she is a brilliant publicist, and she works for herself. But as for Jennifer Lawrence, I'm convinced, she's very frank. I think a lot of people like that about her. I think she's a little reckless with her frankness. I worry about her having a Shia LaBeouf moment. Some of you have said, that's crazy, I don't see that happening. But who would have guessed that Shia LaBeouf early on in his career, when, like, for instance, Disturbia was coming out and he was at the peak of his career, who would ever think this is what would happen to him later down the line? So I think that nobody wants a client or an actor that they can't control. So that is something that's a little bit, I think, scary if you were from the industry trying to guess how she would do in the long run. But the other thing is that she's very fortunate she won that Oscar. And of course, you can debate whether or not she deserved it. I think she did a pretty good job in that role. I think her openness really helped her there. But she won an Oscar, and the reason that actors want to win an Oscar so badly, and they compete so hard for it, and they will dedicate decades of their career. Look at Leonardo DiCaprio. He's trying to win an Oscar like a crazy person. Matthew McConaughey has been working hard for like 2 or 3 years now in a path to get that Oscar, and it looks like he might actually succeed this time. And his hard work will pay off. And the reason is because when you have an Oscar, it's very hard for your career to die after that, because you will always be able to be billed by that publicity machine that we were just talking about as an Oscar-winning actress. So she'll always be wanted for that reason. Now, so the question is whether or not her fans are loyal. Now, if you're a Hunger Games fan, are you a Hunger Games fan, or are you a Jennifer Lawrence fan? I think you really have to ask yourself that distinction. So I think, and also just depends on what kind of roles she chooses. If she can graduate to a more of an adult actress, and also she'll find that there aren't a lot of great female roles out there. I mean, this is, as we've just been saying, this has been a great year, but still, there's only room for so many. Will she start competing with Sandra Bullock for roles? She's on the young side, and there aren't, a lot of other actresses, her contemporaries. Emma Watson, for instance, is having a hard time finding really meaningful roles that connect with audiences that do well. So it's still a tough landscape out there. There's a lot of competition, but she has that Oscar, and she has a huge fan base because of the franchises. So someone will want to be giving her a chance even after they. As soon as Hunger Games and X-Men, she leaves those, and who knows how long they'll last. Hunger Games is only has conceivably 2 more films, but she could be Mystique for a very long time. But you can be sure that someone else is going to want to pick her up. And she also is establishing good relationships with directors. David O. Russell put her in American Hustle because he liked her in Silver Linings Playbook. He obviously liked working with her enough to get her again. So if she continues to build really good relationships with directors and they want to work with her, and if she has this Oscar and she continues to have these box office hits, yes, I think there will always be people who want to hire her. And the Oscar, you can work forever with that. So that's my answer to that. I think Jennifer Lawrence isn't going away anytime soon. Even if she manages to make some bad headlines, she'll still be in the headlines. So that's today's morning movie news. Thank you for everybody for tuning in. Write down below what you think of today's 3 stories, the viewer question, and what you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.